All right, guys, here's one last video from me for today, and it's about two very closely related musical forms that became popular during the Baroque period, and that is opera and oratorio. So we're going to start off by saying, what is an opera? An opera is a dramatic work which incorporates many elements of theater. Oratorio is a musical composition for voices or orchestra without using costumes, actions, or scenery. The main difference between an opera and an oratorio is that opera uses costumes, scenery, and dramatic action, whereas oratorio uses none of these elements. In other words, oratorio is a concert piece, whereas opera is musical theater. It's basically the direct forerunner to musicals that we're used to watching. It's just like that. An opera, which started in Italy at the end of the 16th century, is part of the Western classical music tradition. It is a dramatic work in one or more acts set to music for singers and instrumentalists. Now, this is going to sound familiar because you heard this from cantata. There are two types of singing in a traditional opera: recitative, a speech-inflected style, and arias, a more melodic style. Many elements of the spoken theater, such as acting, scenery, props, and costumes, are incorporated into operas. Operas sometimes also contain dance. The plot of the opera tends to deal with history and mythology. Opera performances are usually given in an opera house, or these days in a concert hall, but back in those days there were opera houses that were specifically meant to have operas performed in them. Now, what is an oratorio? An oratorio is a large musical composition for orchestra, choir, and soloists. An oratorio uses choir, soloists, and ensemble, various distinguishable characters, and arias. While oratorios are strictly a concert piece, they are sometimes staged as operas, and operas are occasionally presented in concert form, so that becomes a little bit confusing. There is usually little or no interaction between the characters in an oratorio. There is neither scenery nor action. An oratorio also does not use props or elaborate costumes. Oratorios also deal with sacred topics, making them appropriate for performance in the church. Stories from the Bible, lives of saints, and biblical topics are common themes in oratorios. Oratorios became extremely popular in 17th century Italy. Bach's Christmas Oratorio, Handel's Messiah, the St. Matthew Passion, and Haydn's Creation, which we will talk about in the classical period, are some famous examples of oratorios. Okay, so let's just clarify this. The difference between opera and oratorio. One of the main differences is in its definition. Opera is a dramatic work in one or more acts set to music for singers and instrumentalists. An oratorio is a large musical composition for orchestra, choir, and soloists, but note that it's not like a dramatic work. It's not meant to have drama or acting with it. Okay? Opera is musical theater. Oratorio is a concert piece. Are you understanding the difference there? Okay? Opera uses costumes, scenery, and action. Oratorio does not use costume, scenery, and action. It doesn't. Opera uses legends, myths, history. Oratorio uses sacred and religious topics. And then finally, opera has distinguishable characters and there's interaction between them. Oratorio, there's no or just a little bit of interaction between the characters in an oratorio. So, all in all, I think a lot of people would say, hey, I'd rather go to an opera. At least I'm going to be like watching them act and watching them do things on the stage, and I'll be able to kind of tell what's going on. And in an oratorio, when you sit down to watch an oratorio, it's like you're sitting down to watch just a concert. You're not planning to see anybody come out, sword fighting, or you're not going to see like a great ship, launch from one point to another on the stage. It's just not like that. That's not how it is. And it feels more, I don't know, it's something that would be appropriate for a church service rather than the opera. And remember, we said too that and I'm trying to remember, I think this was during Handel's operas, that people would go there and they would bring their like food and alcohol and like playing cards, and they would just almost ignore what was happening on stage. It was just like a big giant social event. I feel like that was much less likely to happen in an oratorio, where it felt more like a religious service or something that they needed to be sitting there listening to those religious words. So that pretty much wraps up our Baroque period. We covered it in depth. We talked about what was going on in history in the time period. We talked about 3 very famous composers, Vivaldi, Bach, and Handel. You know all about each one of those. And now we've explored the various musical forms, which would be cantatas, concertos, operas, and oratorios. So after this, I'm going to leave you with a little bit more music to listen to. If you have time at the end of class, that is how I expect you to spend it. And then when I see you again, we will be reviewing this material. All right, have a great Thursday.